So probably the two most frequent questions we get asked on our socials and YouTube comments is, what camera do you guys use and what camera should I buy? Short answer, our main camera is still the Sony A7 III, and yes, you should buy a Sony A7 III. If that's all you need to hear, then great. For everyone else, stick around and let's talk about why. Now, before the fanboys start getting angry, I want to preface this video by saying, quite honestly, any modern camera that's come out in the last 3 to 4 years is going to be generally pretty good. That's just kind of where we are now in terms of camera specs and technology, whether you go for Canon, Nikon, Fujifilm, Sony. We just live in this kind of like golden age of cameras, which is a great thing for consumers. You've only got to look at the crazy specs of cameras like the Sony A1 or the Canon R5 to see how far we've come. But at the same time, I do think it's important to remember who these kinds of cameras are targeted at and whether it's actually practical dropping several $1,000s for features that 99% of us probably don't even need. So I do feel that the law of diminishing returns comes into play here when it comes to talking about these high-end professional cameras. I mean, do you really need 10-bit 8K raw video for your social media and YouTube videos? Do you even have the hardware and the storage space? I think for most of us, that's a hard no. That's why mid-range hybrid cameras sell so well. And for most people, they offer the best bang for your buck in terms of versatility and performance. So since its release, the A7 III has actually become one of the most popular cameras of the last couple of years. It's quickly become one of the most popular cameras for serious content creators and YouTubers as well, taking over the crown over the much loved Canon 80D. And there's a reason why so many of us still use the A7 III and haven't really felt the need to upgrade it nearly 3 years since its release. Have there been better cameras released since then? Well, in terms of just like straight raw horsepower and features, yeah, for sure. But do we absolutely need them? Again, like 8K footage, 60 megapixel sensors. Quite honestly, no, the A7 III is still more than enough camera for us, and it's still a fantastic general all-purpose camera body, whether you're a YouTuber, filmmaker, portrait shooter, wedding photographer, street videographer. For me, it's still the camera I would personally recommend to most people looking to get a professional level camera but at a reasonably affordable price. Speaking of which, you can literally pick one of these up brand new still for about $1,750. I've seen these go on eBay for as cheap as about £1,300 to £1,400 in the UK, in very good condition as well. So considering how expensive more modern cameras are at the moment, for not that huge of a difference, it's kind of hard to argue that the A7 III is still one of the best deals out there, pound for pound. So what about the specs of the camera? Can they still keep up in 2021? Well, the A7 III has a 24.2 megapixel sensor with 15 stops of dynamic range, 693 phase detection AF points covering 93% of the frame. You can continuously shoot up to 10 frames per second with tracking. It's got really good ISO performance. It's got IAF, Animal, IAF, 4K video, 120 FPS video in 1080p. Like seriously, for most people buying this kind of camera, it's more than enough for most people. So okay, if you shoot sports, you might want to get a faster camera with a faster write speed buffer, or if you do fashion prints, you need a higher megapixel sensor, then great, go for the A9 or the A7 R IV with that 61 megapixel sensor, something crazy like that. Or if you only shoot video and you need that super high resolution and 10-bit video, something like an A7 III or an FX3 might be a better fit for you. But then we are talking about specific professional use that's going for double, even triple the cost of the A7 III. These just aren't cameras I'd recommend for, most photographers or content creators. Just as a general workhorse camera that can do everything well, I do think that the A7 III has really good specs for the price you pay. Honestly, a 24.2 megapixel sensor and 8-bit video for YouTube, social media, whether it's video or photos, trust me, it's already overkill considering, YouTube compression, Facebook compression. Not to mention most people are still viewing on phones or on 1080p monitors. The autofocus on these Sony cameras as well, for me, it's just so good. Like on par with Canon's dual pixel AF. I've never had any issues with like face detect and tracking, so it's a really dependable camera for vloggers and YouTubers. And that IAF for photography and portraiture in particular, it just makes our work so much easier. It's not just a gimmick, it actually works. You know, it's reliable, I can depend on it. Even with like fast moving subjects, it just makes shooting people so easy. And you don't have to stand there fiddling with like single point AF like you would do on a DSLR. You just point, track the eye, and boom. Fast, reliable, tact, sharp eyes every time. Plus, it works on animals too. Like seriously, once you use IAF, you'll never be able to go back to using one of these dinosaur DSLRs. Sorry, I said it. For video shooters, you get 4K up to 30 frames per second at 100 megabits per second and up to 120 frames per second at full HD. So video footage looks fantastic with amazing colors and contrast, and that 15 stops of dynamic range really helps here. And that option to shoot super slow motion videos at 120 frames, again, once you experience it, it's really hard to go back to 60. On top of that, you've got 5-axis image stabilization and the ability to shoot in various picture profiles like S-Log and HLG. The IS works really great to help you get those really smooth, more stable handheld shots, and the inclusion of different picture profiles means that you can get a ton of flexibility in terms of color grading and in post. And for most people doing content creation for the web, for social media, and even, you know, professional freelance work, the A7 III ticks a lot of those boxes. I mean, okay, 8-bit video on the A7 III versus 10-bit video, you are gonna notice that difference is kind of like the difference between JPEG and RAW. So if you do need 10-bit video, you know, you're not who the A7 III is for, and you're looking at a far more expensive cinema grade camera anyway. Another huge plus for the A7 III is the durability. This thing really is a workhorse of a camera. Like, I'm not the kind of guy who babies my cameras. Like, I work them hard, and let me tell you, this thing has been out in pouring rain, it's been in snow, it's been on horseback, it's been in sweltering like tropical heat, and it has never skipped a beat and never overheated. Oh, and did I forget to mention that dual card slot as well, so you can reliably back up your work onto 2 memory cards. Again, this is an absolute must-have if, like us, you rely on your camera for income. And like some of those other features, once you have experienced 2 card slots, it's very, very difficult to go back to just having one. Now, I think a really important point to touch upon as well is just the popularity of this camera means 2 things. So one, because it's so popular, there are so many resources, tutorials, custom picture profiles, LUTs, like whole dedicated YouTube channels for this camera. So if there is something you need for this camera, you'll more than likely be able to find it. And 2, because it's such a popular camera and because Sony has sold so many of their mirrorless E-mount lineups, there are just so many lens options for Sony E-mounts. This means you get a really wide selection of fantastic first and third-party lenses, but also lenses that will retain their value to you if you decide to upgrade to another Sony camera. Let's say you start with an A7 III, but you really want to do fashion, you need more megapixels, then great, get an A7 R IV with that 60 megapixel crazy sensor and take all of your lenses with you. Or if you're a wedding videographer or you shoot music videos, and you can upgrade to an S3 or a new FX3, and again, you're good to go with all of your E-mount lenses. The first-party lenses are kind of pricey, admittedly, but more and more third-party manufacturers are jumping on that E-mount bandwagon. I'd definitely check out the Tamron Holy Trinity, the 17-28, the 28-75, and the 70-180. They offer fantastic bang for your buck. So are there any issues with the A7 III? There obviously is no such thing as a perfect camera, and this is no exception either. The lack of a flip screen is definitely a bummer, particularly if you're a vlogger, but honestly, a cheap £99 monitor fixes this. The menu UI is just a cluster of a mess. You do get kind of used to it after a while, but compared to Canon cameras, there's no comparison, it's just a hot mess. And other than that, the 8-bit video we kind of covered already, and you do lose some of the focusing features at 120 frames. I think it changes to contrast detect, but it still works fine, just not as good as Face AF. But for the price you pay, most of these issues are pretty minor in my opinion. So overall, the A7 III, even in 21, in my humble opinion, is still one of the most versatile and well-rounded cameras out there. It does a great job of being a hybrid all-in-one camera, and it was a beast of a camera 3 years ago, and honestly, it still kind of is considering that price and the amount of cheap third-party lenses as well. So for those of you still watching, this is the camera I'd recommend to people looking for a proper full frame camera for serious work and play, YouTube, photography, content creation. It's a reliable workhorse of a camera, but one that won't break the bank as well. And I think it's going to be around for a few years to come still. Anyway, that's going to wrap up this video. Thank you so much again for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you loved it. Follow us on the socials. As always, I'll see you on the next one. All right, peace out, guys.